Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on another smoke break. And we are closing in on the next to last phase of the college football offseason as media days have arrived, particularly Big 12 media days, July 7th and July 8th in Frisco, Texas, at the Star, aka Dallas Cowboys headquarters. And I've covered this event for over a decade now. It's not the biggest, most important deal in the world. It is very much talking season / hype season, but it is the next to last leg of the off-season journey as talking / hype season and media days leads into actual opening of practices and starting to talk about the first week, the first real game, and what all that looks like. And then eventually, not too long thereafter, the actual season itself. So we are getting close, but media day is one of those stops along the way. And for the Big 12, I've already talked about the teams that will be in attendance on day one and some of the storylines that I find interesting heading in to day one. Not trying to make this more than what it is, but just going over each team and just having a thought or two about who will be representing them, as well as what the big talking points will be as everybody converges up in the Dallas area next week. But day one, you had Arizona State, Baylor, BYU, UCF, Colorado, Houston, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech. Well, now it is time to talk about day two, and day two includes all the other teams that I didn't mention there, which would be Arizona, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, TCU, Utah, and West Virginia. So those will be the teams in attendance on day two, head coaches as well as player representatives. So here's kind of what I'm thinking as far as those schools go. And if you want a little bit of a deeper dive individually, plus my official regular season predictions and whether or not your team makes a bowl game and what all that looks like, you can head on over and watch the individual videos on each of these 16 programs and my Big 12 wrap-up where I give my championship game teams and prediction on who may or may not make the playoff. That is elsewhere on this YouTube page. But on to day two of Big 12 Media Days, Arizona with head coach Brent Brennan. He will have in tow offensive lineman Tristan Bounds, linebacker Tay Brown, defensive back Javion Cole, quarterback Noah Fafita, wide receiver Chris Hunter III, defensive end Trey Smith, and wide receiver Trey Spivey. So a lot of big names, a lot of big returning players for the Wildcats. And I think for them, it's just a matter of, can they just build off of last year? I mean, can Noah Fafita, as well as an aside to that, be the best quarterback in the league, ... Again, first team all Big 12 a year ago. Was not necessarily one of the first names you mentioned when it came to the best quarterback in the league. When you had your Sam Levitts, you had your Avery Johnsons, you had a lot of question marks as well, but Sawyer Robertson was getting a lot of love in the preseason, among others. Noah Fafita talked about very highly, especially coming off the heels of the partnership of he and Teteroa McMillan. But he had a really good year last year, and I almost felt like as much as he was still first team all Big 12, I don't know how much it resonated, really. I still don't feel like if you ask most common Big 12 fans at the end of the year, like, who is the best quarterback, I don't know what percentage actually would have said Noah Fafita, but Arizona was a nice surprise. Not a lot was thought about them and their ceiling a year ago. But they go win a respectable amount of games, get into the postseason, and they hush all the talk about Brent Brennan being on any kind of a hot seat. Far from it. He's going to be in town for a while, just solidified his seat, if anything, with the year two showing. So what does this next year look like? How good can Noah Fafita be in what will be his swan song as one of the all-time great Arizona players? And can the Wildcats not only be good again this year, but can they take it a step further and be an actual title contention? They see them as one of those teams that's not the first 3 or 4 you mentioned with the best odds to get to Arlington, but certainly a team that has the goods to potentially get to Arlington and maybe be a surprise in getting to Arlington, because I don't know how many people are predicting them to finish in that top 2. So it's not Big 12 title game or bust, but don't be surprised if they end up in the Big 12 title game. And when it comes to talking about them, it starts at quarterback. It goes to now security surrounding the head coach, but it's also a question of, with a lot of really good players back and some lost, what and how good can this Arizona Wildcats team look like and be, or what will they look like and how good will they be? Cincinnati, Scott Satterfield will have a smaller grouping of players: quarterback J.C. French, linebacker Antoine Peak Jr., offensive lineman Evan Tangisdal, and also offensive lineman Taron Tayo. So 4 players was kind of the norm that everybody would bring. Every once in a while, you'd see a team with 5. So they're kind of sticking to the routine, but it has been noticeable. A lot of other schools are bringing, like Arizona, like 6 and 7 guys. I don't know if that's a sign of things to come. Like you feel so good about your team, you're bringing more players or not. But J.C. French is obviously one of the places where you start with Cincinnati, and him replacing a really good player in Brennan Sorsby. Scott Satterfield, very much on the hot seat. I think from a lot of Cincinnati fans' perspectives. Not sure how the university feels about it necessarily, the athletic department, but you certainly get that vibe from Cincinnati that Satterfield needs to show something this year. However, that will be quite difficult because, yes, Antoine Peak Jr. is a really good player coming back, but you do lose a lot of really good players to the portal, to graduation, to the NFL. There is not a lot of optimism surrounding Cincinnati. So can Scott Satterfield secure himself? Can J.C. French be as good or live up to what Brennan Sorsby was at least able to do in the last couple of years, and not really skip a beat in that regard? Or will it be noticeable, the quarterback play, going from 2025 to 2026? And it won't be hard for Cincinnati to exceed expectations, because I do think expectations are pretty low for the Bearcats. I am sure, like there was when I talked about Texas Tech, there will be some questions for Scott Satterfield about Brennan Sorsby, and curious to see how he will go about answering those. I don't think it will be an inundation, and that's like the big overriding topic. I think everybody's going to eventually just talk ball, but I do think that's something that will at least be addressed at some point or another during media days, and then depending on how he answers it, it might be in and out and not a big deal at all. But I do think he and Cincinnati should expect to at least have some random Red Raider reporter, for example, want to get the microphone during the first press conference and ask a question, if not when going around and doing individual interviews. But for Cincinnati, it's like, yeah, life post Sorsby. Don't need to treat him like he was the Heisman Trophy winner or anything, but obviously a big name and a really good player for them. Satterfield's temperature. And how much can they exceed expectations by, given that there's not a lot of talk and positivity necessarily surrounding the program right now? Iowa State defensive back David Coffey, running back Aiden Flora, kicker Kyle Conrarty, who I believe is the only kicker that's going to be in attendance, quarterback Jalen Rayner, and defensive end Isaac Terrell, or Terrell. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, and my apologies. I will get that right in future videos. But they will, of course, be heading to media days with their new head coach in Jimmy Rogers. And that's the big question about Iowa State, right? It's the post-Matt Campbell era. For the last decade at Big 12 media days, Matt Campbell has been representing Iowa State, going and making the rounds, doing all the various interviews. He's been the face of the program, no matter who's come and gone and been stars for them. He's been the constant. And now he's not. He's going to be at Big Ten media days. So it's the Jimmy Rogers show from here on out, and that alone is of interest and a big part of the discussion surrounding Iowa State. I think, like Cincinnati, but for different reasons, Iowa State with a very low bar to clear this year. I don't think there's much in the way, outside of Cyclones fans maybe, of expectations. I see some fans who think like, yeah, we'll be back in a bowl game. Like, it won't be 8 or 9 wins. We won't be competing for the Big 12, but we'll be back to a bowl game. We just interviewed athletic director Jamie Pollard the other day, and he pretty much guaranteed that they're going to be much better than people anticipate, because I think he gets the sense that a lot of folks are just not thinking they're going to be all that great in year number 1, given the changeover and the success that had been there before, but mostly because it's so unknown, and also there's been so much changeover, like the entire roster, the coaching staff, etc. There's a lot to account for, and it's kind of impossible to know what that's going to look like. So I think Iowa State is very much a mystery team, and I'm curious to kind of get a pulse from talking to the players, and hopefully Jimmy Rogers for the first time ever, of where their confidence level is outside of just the normal we're all 0-0. It's a new year bravado and everything like that. But what's kind of the sense that you get from ISU in this new era post Matt Campbell? Will be interesting to see because, well, most of us have never seen that up close and personal at media days, at least. Kansas head coach Lance Leipold, of course, will be in attendance, as well as offensive lineman Calvin Clemens, defensive end Leroy Harris III, defensive tackle Blake Harreld, linebacker Trey Lathan, wide receiver Cameron Pickett. I think most of the talk around Kansas will revolve around the fact that they're a bit of an uncertainty. Interesting, they did not bring any of the quarterbacks, as that's still a question mark about exactly what that will look like. So certainly will be a topic that's brought up with probably every interview that Lance Leipold does. But how do they try to get back on track a little bit? Last year, a weird year right out of the gates, the whole Texas Tech situation and how all that unfolded. It was a strange and a very forgettable year. And I think to the point where now there's no Jalen Daniels to fall back on, like for the first time in a long time. I know we've talked about him at length the last couple of years, and he's not in the equation. He was one of the better interviews, by the way, as well amongst the players at Big 12 Media Days, not just while he was in attendance, but really like one of the better interviews you could have regardless of what year you're talking about. So his big personality is gone. The health questions that followed him are gone, but you do have your offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, coming back after the brief tenure at Penn State. So can they rekindle the magic? That seems to be the big storyline. And can Lance Leipold sort of douse the flickers of flames of a little bit of a fire starting in that seat of his? I get the sense that Kansas fans need to see something this year. And so I think that's really where you start with KU is rebuilding the confidence, rekindling the magic of the Kotelnicki-Leipold partnership on offense, finding the right quarterback and playmakers, and just reestablishing a level of we know what we're doing here and we're going to be solid moving forward. I think they're just a big question mark for a lot of people. Kansas State defensive back Wesley Fair, running back Joe Jackson, quarterback Avery Johnson, and linebacker Rex Van Wy. I should have checked names before I did this. So Van Wy or Van Wyhe, I will get that absolutely 100% correct once I get done recording this video. But no disrespect intended there. Just trying to cover a lot of ground. I do like to be right on pronunciations, though, so that bothers me. Anyways, moving on. A smaller group, and, of course, in tow is head coach Colin Klein. And I think we're going to just feel a lot of positivity and good vibrations coming off of the K-State group because it's a new day. As much as Chris Kleiman was a really good head coach, the last couple years, just things have felt off. Clearly, there were personal life things going on. There were program things going on. Last year got off on the weirdest foot possible overseas. And despite that, they still were competitive and won their fair share of games, but everything felt sort of off last year. Avery Johnson did not become probably as good of a player overall from 2 years ago to last year as maybe people hoped for, but still shows those signs of how good he can be. And with a new head coach in tow here in Colin Klein, I mean, that's where you start as far as the interest goes. What does a Colin Klein-led Wildcats program look like in year number one and beyond? That's the big changeover to focus in on, and where a lot of, I think, the discussion will center. But also Joe Jackson with a really solid year. How does he follow that up? But of course, Avery Johnson. I mean, he is capable of being all Big 12 first team quarterback. He's also capable of just looking a little bit more pedestrian. So what can Colin Klein bring out of him as far as this 2026 campaign goes, and knowing that the clock's also ticking on him? That's, to me, what's most interesting is that partnership and how quickly they can get the ball rolling and how successful Klein can be right out of the gates. But I get the sense from a lot of K-State folks that maybe a little bit let's kind of play this a little bit more not pessimistically by any means, but let's play this a little bit tamer and not get too crazy and start predicting 9 and 10 wins immediately. But I think if they go win 8 games, 9 games, I wouldn't be totally shocked by that. I think that means Avery Johnson's having a great year. Joe Jackson's running his tail off, and the defense is good, and all of that. That's entirely possible. K-State, one of those teams that I think there's others you just cross through and you say, hey, if they end up being better than I expect, like that was just nobody could have predicted that. But for K-State, I think you can see where that would be something that occurs right away for them. So, yeah. The Avery Johnson show, the Colin Klein era, that's where K-State's questions will start, and a lot of what the talk will be about them. Meanwhile, you've got TCU, quarterback Jaden Craig, defensive tackle Marcus Deal, defensive tackle Ansel Imbu, defensive back Jamel Johnson, defensive end Paul Oyewale, and offensive lineman Ben Taylor Whitfield, and of course head coach Sonny Dykes. A picture of consistency as TCU. You can almost bank and go ahead and write in like 8 or 9 wins every year. I think this is a year where you go, maybe not. You lose Josh Hoover to Indiana. Jaden Craig, a nice pickup, but coming over from Harvard in the Ivy League. Like, is it just that simple? Does he just slot right in? If he was going to work out well right away, regardless of what classification or league he was jumping from, it stands to reason that Sonny Dykes would probably be the guy that could get him there the quickest and there not be much of a transition. But I'm a little bit more hesitant to just think it'll be smooth sailing. And I think Hoover was a really good player, turnovers regardless, that will be somewhat difficult to replace. So Jaden Craig obviously will bring a lot of questions. They're leaning heavy on the defense with their representation here, which doesn't necessarily mean a ton, but I do think you bring guys that you feel will represent you well and that are probably going to contribute for you and be faces for you this season. So I think they like their D-line based on the group that they're bringing. Beyond that, I think it's just, again, TCU is a pretty steady Eddie. So do they revert back to maybe a little bit under the 8-win type of average mark, or do they exceed that? And are they one of the more surprising teams? I do think if TCU was any better than 8 wins, that will be a surprise for most people out there that don't really picture them into the or picture them in the Big 12 title race necessarily, but that everybody acknowledges could very well be there just based on the program's success over the year. So for TCU, new quarterback, same old Sonny Dykes, but beyond that, just a lot of question marks, and yet the belief that they'll be a bowl team at minimum. Utah, quarterback Devin Dampier, linebacker Jonathan Hall, defensive end Lance Holtzclaw, and running back Wayshawn Parker, and first-year head coach Morgan Scalley will be in tow as well. And so, yeah, no shortage of things to talk about here. Just with Morgan Scalley alone finally taking over the program. He's done a lot of interviews already that I've seen bits and pieces of, but looking forward to hopefully getting to sit down ourselves and talk with him and pick his brain a little bit. Really intrigued by the fact that this has been in the making for so long, that they finally bit the bullet and pretty much pushed Kyle Whittingham to the side and wanted to usher in this era before Scalley just looked at his watch and said, I don't think I'm ever going to be coach. I think I might need to go somewhere else. Before that could happen, they were like, no, you're at home. This is your home. You're here. So now that's been established. That's no longer a question. No more questions for Kyle Whittingham about whether or not he's close to retirement like the last couple of media days. It's all about a brand spanking new era, not the maybe upcoming end of something. Yeah, that alone will be more than enough to drive a lot of the talk about Utah, but having Dampier back and Bird Ficklin back, the quarterback room is going to get a lot of play. And Wayshawn Parker, I mean, that backfield is going to have a lot of talent. Just can they replace the lines will be the big question there. But losing to Kyle Whittingham, losing players like Smith Snowden and John Henry Daly and so on and so forth, is it easy peasy, 1, 2, 3 easy? You change all that up and yet you just hit the ground running, and your typical Utah, people treat them like they won like 7 games last year. They won double-digit games. They were in the mix. But I think we kind of hyper-focus on the Tech game, and it paints a less rosy picture. They were good, and stands to reason they could be really good again this year, especially if Scalley is as advertised. But I'm a little bit hesitant given that it's still a first-year head coach, no matter how long he's been preparing. But if anybody could hit that ground running in Salt Lake City, if anybody was as prepared as you can be to do that, and if anybody had the quarterbacks in the backfield in place to be able to do that, it is Morgan Scalley in Utah this year. But the lines, starting off with those on each side of the ball, are very big question marks. And then finally, West Virginia. Wide receiver Jaden Bray, offensive lineman Nick Crahi, and defensive back Jameer Latimer II. Hopefully I'm pronouncing those right. I will have all pronunciations perfect by the start of the season, as that's just, again, a thing that I'm a stickler about. But just 3 guys being brought for West Virginia, which is kind of surprising unless I just copy and pasted this incorrectly. And if so, then feel free to fill in who I'm missing in the comments below. But of course, the quarterback situation, you got a couple of guys there. You haven't decided on who's QB1 yet, but you feel good about bringing Michael Hawkins in from Oklahoma for one. And I think that, there's obviously a bit of where you're going to start when it comes to West Virginia is the quarterback position. Is it just Hawkins most of the time? Is it Hawkins and Scotty Fox Jr.? Remains to be seen there. Cam Cook at running back. I think the backfield will be a lot of fun. And so long as they have an O-line that can do its thing, then the Mountaineers should be running for a lot of yards and should be a big step, taking a big step forward in that regard this year, and more of the kind of Rich Rod offenses and West Virginia under Rich Rod offenses we come to know and love. But you got to have the big men up front to block for you. So that's the question, but the quarterback competition is definitely one of the top storylines for them, along with more turning over of the roster, bringing in guys like Cam Cook, but also just a bunch of guys in general, to the point where it's kind of hard to know exactly where to place West Virginia in the big picture. Although in hearing from and talking to some Mountaineers fans, they are very optimistic that they are going to be a big leap forward this year. They're going to experience a big leap forward this year, not contending to play in Arlington necessarily, but certainly getting back to a bowl game. I think bare minimum is the bar for Rich Rodriguez to reach. So he'll have his pick of quarterbacks. He'll have a dynamic running back, and he'll have a lot of new players to help him accomplish those things. And of course, the support of Pat McAfee, and I'm looking forward to their jersey retirement for Pat White, who's on staff. A long time in the making for Pat White, and an honor like that. So that'll be amongst the various cool things that you can already know is going to happen for West Virginia. But the wins, a little bit more of a question mark there. I think I'm higher than them, given my official prediction, than probably most are. But yeah, look forward to hopefully talking to Rich Rod again. Entertaining guy. He's definitely a talker, very easy to talk to and with. You kind of your BS meter goes off a little bit depending on what exactly you're talking about, but that's like most every head coach I've ever met in my life to some degree. So I enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll get to talk to all these coaches, Rich Rod included. But we'll see next week when we head to Frisco for Big 12 Media Days on July 7th and July 8th from Dallas Cowboys headquarters, the Star in Frisco. Be some long days with lots of interviews, but man, it is the next to last step before the full meal deal, and that's what makes it so exciting. So drop your thoughts below. What are you looking forward to for Media Days? It's not the biggest event in the world, don't get me wrong, but these are just some of the things, some of the names that I'm looking forward to talking to and talking about as we take a few steps closer to talking season. Until next time, hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit that like and subscribe, and thanks for joining me on another Smoke Break.